Okay, welcome back. You are watching Markets at Noon on ET Now. Let's introduce on the show Manish Sharma, the President and CEO of Panasonic India. The topic being, of course, creating an Atmanirbhar Bharat. That's what we have been talking about and been our focus area as well on ET Now the last couple of weeks. Electronics, of course, is one segment that's quite heavily dependent on importing from China, whether it's the components or the products itself. So Manish, thank you so much for joining us today on ET Now. So like I mentioned, we do rely a lot on electronic components, especially from China. But now with this growing focus of being completely self-reliant, how is Panasonic, sort of taking part in this initiative, on the company level?
Very much for having me on the show. As the name suggests, Simon, you called it Atmanirbhar, and it essentially means that how can we become more self-reliant. So we have divided our strategy into three essential steps and extremely committed to sort of drive this agenda. So first one is that how do we ensure that majority of products which we sell in the country are produced in the country. And I'm extremely happy to share with you that for consumer products, almost everything what we sell in the country is manufactured in the country. So we have about 15 manufacturing units across the country, assembling and manufacturing products here. Now the second is that how do we backward integrate? So giving an example of air conditioners. So from the top, if you look at the industry itself, 70% of the consumption which happens in India is produced in India, but we still import 30% of finished goods. So when I say that, it is for the industry. Panasonic makes all the air conditioners which we sell in the market in the country itself. Then the second very important agenda is that how do we start to manufacture compressors, motors, fan motors, condensing units, which are components of an air conditioner. So Panasonic is now taking steps in that direction, both by way of bringing our technology in the country in the next 3 to 5 years. And second is also to look at possible technology collaborations with domestic component makers to ensure that we create a peripheral environment and backward integration of components. Third, which is most important, is that in line with making ourselves self-reliant, we are also studying the supply chain mechanism of the organization, which essentially means the international procurement offices to align export opportunities in the country and make our manufacturing units hub of exports, especially for the West, which is Africa and the Middle East. So that's how we are looking at this opportunity.
What about the entire industry, Mr. Sharma? How do you see that transforming and shaping up, leveraging on the Atmanirbhar Bharat opportunity? Do you think as an industry we're prepared to take the leap?
I personally feel that this is our moment now, and there are two essential reasons I feel that this is our moment. The first and foremost is that we are at the cusp of explosion of demand in our country, which potentially was due for last many years. And I can go on with the categories where I feel that India is going to really see explosion of demand, whether it is penetration where the penetration is lower. So air conditioners, for example, is just about 5% penetration in the country. I mean, this is a category which is going to sustain growth for many decades. Then refrigerators, newer technologies are coming in, more energy efficient and smarter products are coming in, washing machines, televisions, so and so forth. And then you look at backward integration. So first is I'm extremely optimistic about the fact that this is our moment and we should really grab this particular moment. And second, which I feel is that the geopolitical environment is shaping in a manner that India may emerge as a hub not only for fueling its domestic consumption, but also for enabling the export opportunities. And therefore, I feel that we have to select our bets, in a manner which is very effective. And some amount of prioritization has to happen. So as I mentioned, needless to say, categories where there is a higher potential to backward integrate, especially the home appliances, the kitchen appliances, grooming products, there I think we should put the best of priority. And categories where core technologies or economies of scale are some of the disablers, I think we should put them on a second priority. That is how we should look at our roadmap of next 5 to 7 years.
Okay, Manish, one of the reasons why perhaps a lot of players used to import parts from China is simply because of the kind of cost advantage that affords, and accords rather. With this entire self-reliance move, I mean, I'm sure eventually, of course, India as well will be able to reach that scale and consequently cost that China has. But do you think in the beginning maybe it could lead to increase in costs of manufacturing of these electronic components, and this transition period perhaps may lead to a squeeze in margins for some time, or maybe an increase in prices of the products for customers?
I believe the journey towards making ourselves self-reliant will undergo various stages. And if you look at the disability, so as many of us have a perception, or possibly to some extent it's a reality, that there is a cost differential, and it is essentially because of some disabilities. But when we carefully analyze them, a lot has changed in last 5, 6, or maybe 10 years. I mean, the first and foremost is that today labor cost has become our strength. So it is in some sense an ability compared to China, because labor costs in last few years have really risen fast in China. The disability today is possibly on account of cost of capital, which is far lower in China. And second, I believe, is on account of economies of scale. Now, our country has a huge opportunity to create scale in next 5 or 10 years by way of increasing penetration of appliances or those kind of products. So I personally believe that we have a good opportunity where possibly today the disability might be in the range of 5 to 7 or 8% in majority of product categories. If we have a clear phased approach, and today you hear a dialogue happening between government and industry for a phased manufacturing approach for some of these strategic product categories. So if we take an approach that in next 5 years, what kind of tariff barriers will be created, some of the enablers to ensure that the local manufacturing becomes competitive, I think that that kind of phased approach will be able to do away with these disabilities in next 3 to 5 years for majority of categories.
All right. Mr. Sharma, the macro indicators are pointing to a resurgence of the rural economy. In fact, we've talked to a lot of consumption companies, not only durables, but say transport, FMCG, etc., who are also witnessing a solid trend from smaller cities, towns, and rural markets. Are you seeing a similar trend as well? Is more demand coming in from tier 3, tier 4 sort of areas?
Very similar trend. Actually, June has surprised a lot of us. June has really defied various logics and the assumptions and the forecasts which we created. So in the first instance, I think pent-up demand was cutting across almost all the geographies, the big cities and the tier 1 and the tier 2 towns and beyond. The second sort of indicator is, if I have to give you some objective reflections, June was just about 3% degrowth over last year for us. And I think that this is the case for the industry also. And May was just about half of last year. So that kind of rebound has happened in the month of June. And month till date of July is a growth of 23% over last year for majority of categories wherein we deal with. Within these categories, if you look carefully, refrigerators, which are direct cool refrigerators, have grown 50% in smaller towns and rural areas, whereas the growth into urban markets is about 11 to 12% in the month of June. So that is the kind of differential between growth across these different geographies. And I believe that the positive sentiment and markets being more open across those smaller markets, more lockdowns still getting enforced into bigger cities, etc., I think the reasons can be attributed to those kind of reasons. And I believe with the information coming in, the way monsoon is going to be this year, I think we are looking at a situation which is very promising for the growth to continue in these markets in a similar manner.
Okay, great. Manish, it was great getting in your thoughts on this entire Atmanirbhar move, and especially given the fact that, you lead a sector that does tend to have some amount of China connection, China salience. So thanks so much, for joining us today on ET Now. We will take a very short break right here on the show, but we have lots more management conversations lined up when we return.